Today we're going to disassemble and clean the frame of the Taurus GX4. So I'm going to show you how to disassemble all the parts in the frame. We are not going to customize or modify anything. We're just going to disassemble it for cleaning or repair purposes. Verify there is no magazine in the gun and no round in the chamber. And then when it closes the slide, rotate the takedown lever 90 degrees so it is horizontal. Point the gun in a safe direction. Press the trigger and then pull the slide off the front of the gun. So on the GX4, all the internal components are held in by this one big pin, which is also the takedown lever. Quick warning before we remove this fire control unit from the frame. Once we do this, there are a couple of pieces, including a spring, that are going to pop out of here immediately. Please watch the rest of this video before you start taking it apart to make sure that you are capable of putting it back together again. This is fair warning, so don't take it apart and then complain later if you can't get it back together. To remove this pin, we need to remove pressure on this little spring right here. So all you need to do is get a pin punch, and you want to push this spring in this direction. And at the same time you're pushing it in this direction, you want to push this pin out this way. So to do that, I'm going to put a little pressure on this pin just with my fingertip right here. And at the same time I'm pushing this spring out of the way. Just want to push a little bit on my fingertip. See, now it's starting to come loose. And now I can take my pin punch and just push that clear, and that just comes out. Once that's out, the entire assembly will just pull up like this. The trigger is going to come through the bottom here. Alright, and then it just lifts out like so. That piece might come off. Once it's out, this spring is just going to come loose, and this slide lock lever just sits on this pin right here, so that's going to come out. So the first thing we want to do now is release the spring here. I just get like a little dental pick and just kind of hook that and take it off of that pin. Alright, and now we're just going to press this pin right straight through, and that will come out the other side. Alright, that's your trigger pin. Now this trigger assembly is also connected to this trigger bar over here, but you can kind of bring this down and then gently, be careful not to bend anything, the back piece will come out, and gently turn it sideways to unhook it from this slot right here. Now this pin here, I would not recommend taking this out. I would only remove that if you're going to be repairing, maybe your trigger is broken and you need to repair it and replace it, then I would pull that out. But otherwise I would keep that in there. Alright, so that's the trigger assembly is now gone. So now in the back we have, I guess you could call this the Sear assembly. This is the Sear that releases the firing pin right here. So all we need to do in the back here is push these pins right out. They just come out, and then the Sear assembly kind of comes out. Now I'll show you how to take this piece apart for cleaning. If it looks clean, I don't know that I would go to the trouble of taking it apart. You got a spring in there, you want to make sure you get back in right. But if you want to take this apart, you just have this pin right here. You can just push that pin out, and then your Sear spring is going to come out. So now this is all disassembled so you can clean it all up. We're going to clean everything and then put it back together. Alright, as far as removing the magazine release button, I do have a video on how to reverse that, so you can use that video if you want to take this out. I'll put a link up here in the corner if you want to check out that video. Alright, as far as what I'm going to use to clean it, I'm going to use my favorite cotton swabs. These are dual-ended. They have a pointy end and a regular end for getting in different areas of the gun. Some pipe cleaners to clean the little tiny holes that the pins go in. Hops number 9, and I like to keep it in a pump dispenser, so you just pump up a little bit at a time, use what you need, and the rest of it stays uncontaminated in the bottom. Alright, and we're also going to use a bunch of cotton patches. Alright, so now we're going to clean all the pieces up. Basically, we're just going to wipe them down. We're going to put a little solvent on there, and then we're going to clean everything off, and then we're going to reassemble. First, we're going to clean up the frame here, which is a polymer or a plastic, so I don't want to use a solvent on this per se. So if it's not too dirty, you can just wipe this down with a cloth. If it is real dirty, I would use something like a CLP to clean it, something that's safe on plastics. This is original gun oil, which is my preferred lubricant because it is safe for all different kind of materials. So you can use that, just put a drop on the patch and clean everything up. But this gun is not that dirty. I'm just going to wipe it down real quick with a dry patch and maybe take a cotton swab to clean out the holes here. All right, that's all I'm going to do for the frame. I'm going to do the same thing on any plastic pieces. I'm just going to wipe them down. Again, if they're real dirty, I'll put a little CLP on there. I'll use the solvent on the metal parts. Just wipe down the trigger. My trigger is not very dirty either. Get some of the crud off of here. A little bit dirty, not too bad. All right, I'm going to use a pipe cleaner to clean out any of the holes in any of the parts where the pins go in. Pipe cleaners are excellent for that. Obviously, be very careful you don't lose that little spring in there. Wipe down every piece that might be a little bit dirty. Wipe down pins. Wipe down all the little pieces here. This is the slide lock lever. Wipe down the little sear pin here. Now, this is the actual sear. This is a very tiny part. You'll want to wipe this down. I would use a pipe cleaner for that. Pipe cleaners get in here real good. Right? Any little notches can be cleaned with a pipe cleaner. All right. If you need a little solvent, just pump up a little solvent and then just kind of wipe it down that way. Wipe all the solvent off. Use a dry pipe cleaner to get in all the notches that we cleaned. We're going to do the same thing here. Get a little bit of solvent on a cotton swab. Just clean this all up this way. Just try and get in all the little spaces there. Then kind of dry it out with a dry cotton swab. All right, and then we're going to get in all these little holes here with pipe cleaner. Quickest way to get them done. That, and then blow it out in case there's any fuzzies in there. All right, now this piece is pretty clean now. All right, now we just have this frame right here. Gonna get some solvent on the frame for sure. Just gonna kind of get everywhere real quick. Then I'm just gonna wipe it all down. It's probably best to use rubber gloves, nitrile gloves when you're using solvent. I just don't use it because I'm also trying to run the camera and I don't want to get solvent on my camera, but good idea. I'll put links down in the description. All right, now before I put everything back together, I'm gonna put just a little bit of lube. And what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna put literally 1 drop of CLP on a patch, and I'm just going to use that 1 drop to just wipe down these pieces with a little bit of lubricant. This is just going to help keep everything nice and corrosion free, and it's going to help lube. These are the rails where the slide moves back and forth, so you do want a little lube on those. And any other pieces that move, which is pretty much all these pieces, just give them a real quick wipe down with the 1 drop on the patch. Just wipe down the trigger bar. It does move a little bit, and a little bit on here. Just protect it. Tiny bit of lube. And each of the pins, a little touch with this oily rag and this spring maybe. All right, now we got everything just a touch lubed. Now let's reassemble. All right, so let's reassemble the Sear assembly. So it's just these 4 pieces here. So this is kind of the holder. This is the Sear itself. And the Sear sits inside the Sear assembly like this, but you have to put it in from underneath. And it has these 2 tabs on the side, and they go up into this slot. So you need to put it in this way so it fits in. So this oblong slot goes in first, and it drops in like that. So the Sear ends up sitting something like that. Okay, so take a look at how that works. All right, once you get the Sear kind of in place, put a finger on top here and flip it over so it doesn't fall out of there or flip around. And then you want this to sit in the bottom just like this. Okay, and now we want to put this pin in this bottom hole. The pin needs to go in, and it needs to go through the slot in the Sear. See how the pin is going through the slot in the Sear. See it here like that. Okay, so now we have to put the spring in. So we want to turn this upside down, put a finger underneath so things don't flop around too much. We want to back that pin out just to there, because the spring is going to go in that middle slot. So you want the Sear to still be going through this piece and through this little piece right here, okay, to hold that in place. All right, so now that everything's sitting like that, take your spring this way and drop it down in so the coil of the spring goes into that little slot in there. It might be a little tricky to get it set just right. Okay, that's how you want it to sit. So what you have is this end of the spring is right in that little slot in the middle there. The other side of the spring is just sitting in that notch. So now we want to push the spring down a little bit further and push this pin in to go through the middle of that spring. Being careful not to move anything, I'm going to use this cotton swab to just kind of push that spring down a touch more and toward the front so this pin will go through it. So we're just going to push it down a little bit, push this through, and I got lucky that time. Okay, so the pin went right through the middle of the spring. Hopefully you can see that here. All right, so that spring, so the spring is captured just like that. that. Keep your fingers on the ends here so that when you flip it over, that pin doesn't come out. I'm going to show you the Sear. You can see the coils of the spring right underneath there. So this Sear should kind of move against the spring a little, and if you turn this over this way, this is the lever that's activated by the trigger bar right here. So if you move that back and forth, you should see the Sear move down into the assembly, and that's when it lets go of the striker. Okay, so you can see how the Sear moves when I press on this lever. All right, so now that we have it together, being careful not to let that pin come out. So it's going to sit like this. So basically just put it right back in here, line up the holes for the pins, and they're two different sizes. So the bigger one goes here. Push that in. The smaller one goes in the back here. Alright, push that in. Now be careful, these sit kind of loosely, so until we get the rest of it put together, you're going to kind of have to pay attention. If you wanted to put a piece of tape on either side to keep them from falling out, you can do that. Just remember to remove that tape later. Next, we want to put the trigger and the trigger bar back in. So as you recall, this kind of hooked in here like that, and this comes underneath. Alright, so just kind of move this around until you get the trigger. The back of the bar is going to go in that slot like that, so it's going to look like this, and then this is in the slot here. And then now your trigger is going to be kind of flopping around, so you want to line up the hole in the plastic trigger piece with the hole in the frame, just like that, and then get your trigger pin, put that through there, being careful to watch the ones in the back. Make sure that comes through. It's actually going to end up like that. I'm holding it vertical so that the pins don't go anywhere. Now we just want to put that spring back on. This part was a little tricky. Get it hooked on there as best you can. Alright, it should look just like that. Alright, and as you move the trigger back, you see it's holding on with that spring. Now the next thing that goes on here is this piece. It sits on here like this. So you need to kind of hold things together. Alright, get the frame ready. Lastly is this spring right here. So this spring goes in this way. As you can see, you remember it's kind of hooked through the other side. That's what we had to push to release the pin at the beginning. So it's going to sit like this. When we go into the frame, you're going to see how that goes. All right, so hold that together kind of like this. My thumb is kind of holding this piece on and the spring in place as well. And then we're going to put the back end into the frame all the way back like that. And then you'll have to use your finger to push the trigger back a little bit, clear the trigger hole in the bottom there. Okay, so the trigger has to come through like that, still holding everything together. And when we get down to here, you want to make sure that this spring is sitting like that. Okay, and as you push it down, the frame is going to push this little piece up top here. Okay, as you see, so slowly bring that down. All right, so that disappears in there like that. And once everything sits all the way down in, the top of this rail should be parallel with the black plastic. Your slide lock should be sitting here just like that. Your trigger should be sitting like that. And you should see a little bit of that edge of that spring in that hole there, because that's what's going to hold the pin in place as we put that in. So the last thing we need to do is put this pin in. So the pin, the slot is on the right hand side of the gun. So you want to put this through this way. You want that slot to be vertical like that. All right. Put a little pressure on the pin, and now we have to push that spring out of the way again. Push the spring back, and that should allow you to push the pin back in, and it should be just about flush with the side there. And just about flush. All right, there we go. Once you get the pin in flush, what we want to do is make sure that this lever is horizontal. So turn it counterclockwise. That's to unlock it. So now that this slot is parallel with the gun, sitting just like that. Now get your slide, put it on the frame, go all the way back, lock it in place, make sure the guide rod looks like that and the barrel is sitting at an angle like that. And once that looks good, now you can close the slide. And at this point, your takedown lever should have automatically gone vertical again. So it is now vertical in relationship to the gun. All right, now lock the slide back. I know your gun is empty, but please verify, because we're going to be pressing the trigger. Always verify your gun is unloaded before you press the trigger. There is no magazine in the gun, and there is no round in the chamber. All right, now close the firearm, point it in a safe direction, press the trigger, rack the slide again, press the trigger, rack the slide, press it and hold it back, rack the slide, release the trigger gently till you hear your reset, and then press the trigger again, and you should hear it click. All right, now what you want to do is a function and safety check. I'll put a link up in the corner here for that video just to run through all the different functions of the gun to make sure it's working right. And there we have it. It's now nice and clean. Thanks for watching. Please check out the links in the description for all the products and items that we used here in this video, and thank you for watching.